Hello and welcome to the video. I'm Villain Theory and today we're talking about Psylocke, one of the latest heroes in Marvel Champions. Now, Psylocke is really interesting and I'd love to spend a long time talking about her, but I'm trying a slightly new format today, a bit of a shorter video. So let me know in the comments, guys, if you prefer this or if you prefer the longer style I've done with the other, previous X-Force heroes. But let's just get into it. I'm going to talk a bit about what Psylocke, what makes Psylocke Psylocke, maybe, if you like her, compare her to a couple of other heroes and things. And then we'll dive into these categories based on my experiences with her. So let's get into it. Psylocke is a psionic character. That means she has access to psionic events and, she can use Cerebro, which is a support card better than most characters. And there's a couple of new, telepathy, telekinesis, a couple of new cards that really work quite well with her in different ways. And she also has a mutant trait on her alter ego, which lets her use, again, Cerebro, but also Weapon X, Moira, cards like that. So very good character in terms of what she can access based on her traits. And the way she works is, although she only has one printed for an attack, she starts off with these two Psi Energy weapons in play. They start off on the Psi Knife side, and they can be flipped to their other side, which has Psi Katana. So Psi Knife on one side, Psi Katana on the other, and you can flip them using basically the ability to generate a resource on those cards themselves, as you can see in front of you, or with Psylocke's basic ability, when she uses a basic power, which you can also see here on the screen. So you kind of have this puzzle to, flip her weapons into the right thing, the right side to use her basic stats most effectively. And I should also add the Psi Katana side doesn't just add attack, it adds piercing, but you also want them on the right kind of configuration for her events, because depending on what side her Psi Energy weapons are on, her events do different things, which makes them really versatile. So really interesting, really versatile events. And yeah, the puzzle is, get the perfect basic stats, for your basic activation, but have the correct weapon configuration for your events. And if you're only playing one of her events that turn, pretty straightforward. You can, change both of your Psi Energy weapons by generating resources with them, so you can have them wherever, and you can flip them an extra time with your basic power. And if you ready Psylocke up somehow, you can flip, another one again. So you have quite a lot of ways to get the weapons onto the right side to do what you want. But when you want to do multiple events or things, or you have maybe like a patrol minion out and you need to, defeat that first before you can play your forwarding thing, that's when the puzzle gets a bit more interesting and it's really, really fun. Some people have worried that Psylocke is going to be Phoenix version 2. I think there's a pinch of truth to this, but not a lot. So because of their traits, Psionic and Mutant, they do have a lot of similar deck building tools. And because they can both get free forwarding and free attack, through different ways, there is some similarities there. I do think Psylocke does it very differently. She has a much, much, much easier time with it, whereas Phoenix is very kind of rigid in how her stats change. Psylocke, you kind of very versatile, do what you need when you want to, whereas Phoenix, it's a big commitment to change those stats, and it has some consequences in different ways, pros and cons. You get your more powerful events now, but your nemesis minion becomes more likely because of your obligation, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of similarities, but there are also a lot of differences. Their events completely different, and while they can have similar decks, I think Psylocke's decks can be very different. Psylocke actually uses a lot of skill cards, which we will cover, and those can change her deck building and gameplay tremendously. Another character I think Psylocke has a lot in common with is actually the character I'm calling the first Psionic, which may be a bit of a stretch, but she's got a psychic link. We've got SPDR, also known as Penny Parker, and Penny Parker can kind of do some of the things Psylocke does. There's elements that seem inspired. They both have a lower hand size than usual, and they both have these resource generators they start with. The resource generators also double as stat boosts, although Penny Parkers are limited, that you have to exhaust them for the stat boost instead of the resource, whereas with Psylocke, you're always getting the stat boost and then you can just exhaust them for the resource. So not exactly the same, but slightly similar. So while I think Psylocke has a lot in common with these two characters, I think there are another two characters that she maybe feels more similar to, or at least some kind of hybrid of all of them. And this is a bit of a stretch. I do think Psylocke is very unique, but if you like these characters, I think you will like Psylocke. And those are Nova and Domino. So with Nova, when you start, you kind of get the Supernova helmet from your alter ego ability, and then when you use Nova, you can ready it up again, and it generates a resource. So long story short, Psylocke can generate 2 resources, a turn, and so can Nova, just with what their alter ego kind of brings in. And I think both of their events have some things in common too. Although I think Psylocke in general is more versatile, and so are her events. They both kind of have events which kind of hit middle values. They're really kind of events which I think are designed for control rather than, annihilating the villain or anything like that. So I think they're both kind of control heavy heroes that are affected a lot by deck building and have this kind of, double resource generation from their alter ego ability. And Domino, on the other hand, I think is similar to Psylocke because they're both very, thinky heroes. You have to put a lot of thought into what they're going to do, albeit in different ways. And you also can shuffle things back into your deck with your alter ego ability with Psylocke, and with Domino, you kind of move things from your discard pile on top of your deck, which is not exactly the same. It does function very differently, but there are elements. There's a link there, and I think they are both designed by the same designer. So I can kind of see some of the strings in a very soft way. Both of those characters are both characters that want to go alter ego all the time. Domino, because all her kind of crazy good support cards are alter ego only. Psylocke, because she has a hand size of 4 in hero form, but a hand size of 6 in alter ego. So going alter ego gives you a 50% increase in the cards you have to play that round. So it's just super valuable. And Psylocke does have a lot of good supports she can get access to there as well, such as Cerebro, which is kind of busted. So if you like Phoenix, SPDR, Penny Parker, Nova, and Domino, I don't see how you couldn't like Psylocke. And I would say, even if you don't like a couple of those characters, which for me, a couple of those score a bit lower down on my, favorites list, I still really like Psylocke. I'm a big, big fan of Psylocke. I'm just going to mention it quickly, but Psylocke is a kind of, the skill hero where like Cyclops uses tactics, she uses skills. This is the first one to really give skills any kind of special, significance as skills. This is because she has this training regimen support card, which can set your deck for one and get you it when you need it, which leads to some crazy combo potential, a lot of consistency in general. I think I mentioned it, but Psylocke is a very consistent hero. You can kind of do what you want when you need to. And there are a lot of good skills in this game when you go looking for them. Well, this is just a few of them. Quite a lot here, but there's also, things like fluid motion, directed force, probably some more other good ones, which I've forgotten and can, fit here. Hone technique, really good for her because the Psi Knife is generating a mental resource on demand. Repurpose, I love this card for her. She has great stats. The ability to use training regimen to get it when you want it means you can do some big combos. It's not unusual for me to hit 2 or 3 repurposes on one turn and just, in solo play, that is the villain destroyed. And in 2-player, that is also usually the villain destroyed. It is really good with her. And honestly, leadership skill not talked about very often, but that card is really good. And, particularly good here with Psylocke because she can just grab it from her deck. One of the reasons you do want to add skills in if you can, although they are not essential for her, is because training regimen can very easily run out of skills because she only has a few of them naturally in her deck, which were just on the screen, but they're sort of upgrades which I like but don't love. So adding a few good skills in can be really beneficial, and training regimen can help you find essential things like hone technique sooner, which is really, really cool. So Psylocke is a Psionic character, which means Cerebro is extremely good for her. And, Scimitar as a weapon is good too, although you do need Psi Holster. But Cerebro is just game-changing, almost game-breaking, not quite, but it does feel very unfair to the enemy sometimes. So Cerebro you can only play if you have the Mutant trait, which, hey, Psylocke does. And it gives you an extra benefit. You can set your whole deck if you have the Psionic trait, which, hey, Psylocke definitely has a Psionic trait. So if Professor X or Karma, who are my favorite allies to do this with, are anywhere in your deck, you can just use Cerebro to grab them. But if they're not in your deck, you can use her Alter Ego ability to exhaust one of your Psi energy weapons and shuffle one of them back in there. So what this basically means is that if you have Cerebro in play as Psylocke, you can always get Professor X or always get Karma whenever you want them. And even though, by exhausting one of your Psi energy weapons, you now can't exhaust it for a resource, Professor X and Karma basically, both punch above their weight to quite a significant degree that it's still very, very good. And even if you're only, breaking even on what you'd expect for that value, they're so consistent and they're so good, Professor X makes it hard to lose to threats or damage, which is a significant upside for any of her decks. So in terms of, auto-include cards, Cerebro and Professor X are definitely, up there for me as the highest two. I also think she would like Avengers Mansion because she has all these resources, but lacks the hand size in hero form. You will kind of notice that on one turn, you do tons and tons of stuff, but then the other turn, when you start in hero form, you have less cards to start with, you do a little bit less, kind of, it's not, tremendously different, but you will have, smaller turns than bigger turns, and a smaller turn than a bigger turn if you keep flipping, which you will want to. So let's get into the actual stats and numbers here. Let's go into where I rate her. We're going to rate these categories out of 5 or a 6 star if I think something is particularly exceptional. And we're going to start with damage, which I've given 3 stars. Damage is very good. Piercing from Psychotana is very good, and the ability to get free attack. But her events kind of lack in damage slightly. So if I use two side katanas to, play Flurry of Blades, what I'm getting there is 6 damage total. And for the same cost, I can get 8 damage from Swinging Web Kick, Peter Parker, and, various other events kind of hit that value or higher. So you're not getting, if you're looking for pure damage, you're not going to find it at the same level as other characters. But what the cool thing about Flurry of Blades is, it deals 2 damage at a time. You can put that 2 damage in different places. It's very reminiscent of Black Widow's Dance of Death and has a total value of 6, just like Dance of Death as well. So you can deal 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage. You can, really control minions by splitting it up and hitting the perfect values you need with this. And you can put it on the villain too. It's best used, with a Psy Katana to get a confuse from it instead of 2 of the damage. But then you're not getting, as much damage. So again, she cannot find damage as easily, I think, as some other characters, at least can't, do burst damage, quite as easily in general, although you can build into it very, very well. But still, 3 stars, pretty good. Threat removal, I've given 4 stars. She has 3 copies of Mental Detection, which is a perfectly fine, pretty good, honestly, thwarting event, which can be, used flexibly to instead draw cards, which doesn't increase her potential threat removal, but does make her threat removal card very good. But the best thing about her and threat removal is she can get free thwarting, as a basic power stat. That's just very consistent, very, very good. Nothing more to say about that too much. Survivability, she's got this really good defense card. The problem is the way her card draw works, and if you're flipping a lot alter ego, you're more likely to draw it when you're alter ego than when you're getting attacked in hero form. And I don't think it punches above the weight of her other cards, I don't think you're going to want to keep hold of this if you draw it in the wrong form. So I don't get to use this card as often as I thought I would, but it's still a very good card. And martial arts training can boost her defense. And honestly, 2 defense starting, it's fine. Something that I think makes her feel like more than a free defense, more than a free survivability character is the fact that because you're going to go alter ego a lot, you're just not getting attacked in the first place. So you could consider her ability to confuse the enemy a lot and go alter ego as kind of a means to, have more survivability. But in terms of just dealing with incoming damage, I would put her about 3 stars. Economy is next, and I almost put this at 6 stars. This is a very strong 5 stars. Starting with those 2 resource generators is very good. If she didn't have a hand size of 4 in hero form, this probably would be 6 stars. Even though she doesn't have a lot else in her deck that generates tons of card draw, although training regimen, getting 1 card if you start alter ego or go alter ego at least, is very good. She has access to some of the best, economy cards I would say in the game. This is, card draw, resource generation. She can get team building exercise, X Gene, Cerebro, Weapon X, X Bunker, Moira. These are all 1 or 2 cost cards, which are generally going to get you at least, 1 resource worth of value every turn. Very, very strong. In terms of control, we have a lot of confuse in the deck and basically no stun. And it's possible to have too many confuses on one turn and then none on the other, unless you're running Cerebro and Professor X, in which case the villain is just permanently confused. In terms of her actual signature kit, it's basically just confuses. And she does actually have a really good way to cancel encounter cards when revealed effects, called Telepathic Suggestion. It's actually one of my favorite sort of encounter card cancels in the game. It's really powerful. Problem is a hero interrupt. You're going to be alter ego a lot of the time and drawing more cards while alter ego, which can kind of, this card is almost borderline worth holding. I would normally only hold it if I was going to end up with a spare resource anyway, or just use one of my weapons to shuffle a Sonic event back into my deck, and I didn't need to do that. So the Telepathic Suggestion can be really good. Speed of setup I put as 4. Now she starts off pretty strong, but I do think she lacks, she's not a hero that comes in and just makes a massive impact out of nowhere. You do have to build up to it a little bit, but she has a lot of resources. She can build quite fast, and you will start to notice after a couple of turns, even if you didn't intend to, you probably have quite a lot of upgrades and things on your board just because she can afford them and they're good for her. So why wouldn't you play them? So it does take maybe a tiny bit of building to do everything you want, but she does it quickly and she's not at all weak. You can build and control the board, which is kind of where this comes from, this score. So not super, super fast, destroying the whole board from turn 1, but still very good, honestly. And similar with her reliability, I think she is really consistent and really versatile because of the way she can change her stats, and that is primarily where the score comes from. She's got all those resources and all the stats changing. She can do what she needs to. Now, the problem is with that hand size 4, you can occasionally run into bad hands. It is just statistically a lot more likely with a hand size of 4 than without it. So that has just brought the score down a tiny bit overall. But for the most part, really reliable hero. You generally have a good Psylocke game every game with Psylocke. It's not like some games are extremely good and then some aren't so good. Then we have card value, which I've put at 4 stars. Again, I think her events punch a little bit lower numerically, but they are really versatile in what they can do. You can, in some cases, split them up or have them deal different things if you have one Psy Katana and then one Psy Knife. So they are really useful in that way. And again, her signature card, you know, even just her, identity card, sorry, bringing in those Psy Knives is just such a strong ability to start the game with. So that can be considered part of her card value as well. But yeah, the hand size of 4 is just sort of slightly holding her back, in my opinion, a little bit here, as well as, if her events were versatile and, hit numerically really high, that would also probably push this up to a 5. But as it is, it's just a strong 4. Ease of play is a 1. Now, if you looked at the heroes I compared her to, I think, especially Domino, these are kind of, more difficult, thinky heroes. But I would say, whereas Domino, I think, can be prone to inflicting, analysis paralysis because you have so many possibilities at all times. Psylocke has less possibilities, but you do need to calculate the values carefully. You need to calculate, what your weapons are going to be in when you use them. So I think it's less options to think about, but you do need to calculate them carefully. So I would say it's less thinking than Domino, although in your first game or two it might feel similar or worse. But it does get easier. You sort of know how you're going to do things. You sort of get certain sort of flows of play down. But she definitely does take some thinking. So if you prefer a character that you can just sort of, just throw down on the board and just play a bunch of stuff, not have to go too slow or, calculate or, too much, then maybe not the character for you. But if you like to sort of tactically, think a bit more about how you're going to set things out or do, some more intricate sequencing, then Psylocke is going to make you feel like a genius. And so, yeah, wouldn't be a character I give to new players, but I think she's strong enough that even if you're not playing her to her, maximum potential, you'll still do quite well with. And if you put in, the time and care, she is very strong, I think. Variety, I actually give 4 stars. So Psionic, Mutant, kind of a lot of cards you might be, feel inclined to include or, really should include in many ways. And I do think Cerebro and maybe Avengers Mansion and Professor X. And if you Protection Karma, and maybe kind of, quote unquote auto includes pretty much. But the fact is, you don't have to put Psionic cards into her deck and you can still do well. You don't have to put skill cards into her deck and you can still do well. But if you do put skill cards in, a lot of possibilities open up. And there are a lot of different skill cards that do different things that offer a lot of unique deck building hooks. And you can just build a few of those into the deck and still do something else quite well. So I think that gives her a lot of different avenues of play, and she is good in every single aspect. She's really good in every single aspect, in my opinion. So, yep, really good variety there. And then it comes to fun factor, and I'm going to say 5. This is my favorite X-Force character so far. We'll see if that, stands the test of time. I do feel a little, hint of recency bias. There's a voice at the back of my mind saying, maybe see how things work out in the long run, but I really like Psylocke. I feel compelled to play Psylocke even now, and I've played quite a bit of her already. I just really enjoy Psylocke. I like the puzzle. I think I like technical characters, characters you have to, really carefully plan and have a lot of options. But for me, Domino was just a bit too many options that it slowed down one of Marvel Champion's strength, which I think is, fairly fast paced. Whereas Psylocke, I think, kind of hits the kind of threshold, the top end of where I would want things to be, but she is still, within where I want things to be. And for me, that is very fun. I love the versatility. I love the combos you can do a training regimen with getting skills, just tutoring them, searching for them at the right time. Cerebro is just so much fun. And I really enjoy the flexibility of Psylocke's cards, which do different things depending on your weapon. So huge, huge fan of Psylocke. And lastly, we'll get into the power sort of ranking. And we actually had a user comment that I should actually just put the character on my existing tier list. So I've got the top half of my tier list I did in my semi-recent now tier list video. And I would put Psylocke as a sort of, A+ hero. So I don't really do plus or minus tiers, but I do think Psylocke is definitely in the top half of A tier, or maybe even in the lower, section of S tier. Now, I do think maybe around the A tier, just on the very cusp of S tier, which might surprise some people, but she is so consistent. She will not hit the highs of, let's say, Penny Parker or Domino, but she starts out with a much stronger early game, in my opinion, and a lot more consistency at doing whatever she needs to do, which I think is very strong. So for me, I put her around the level of Ironheart right now. I don't know whether slightly to the left or to the right, but definitely a very strong hero that I just, don't have bad games with. She is so, so good. Psionic is a really good bonus, but in addition to Psionic, Mutant, and then just the versatile stats, versatile events, all the resources, resource generation, and is very powerful. Team building exercise, X Gene, weapon X. I think I said these already. So many good support cards and resource generators, and even Power of the Mind, new resource card, just elevate her significantly. She can do so much. So, yep, very powerful. Now, we're almost at the end, but something I should have mentioned is that Steady and Stalwart and Psylocke have interesting interactions. She is notably a little worse against them, which is kind of a downside because she has so many confuses, and then they're either half effectiveness or just don't work. However, because depending on what way your weapons are, you can avoid ever having to waste a confuse against a stalwart enemy and just deal damage or something instead, which is very powerful. So I actually think she does quite well against those characters. Now, because she has so much confuse, I'd say she loses more than the average character against them, but she loses less than the average, status card heavy character against them. So that's pretty cool. And a lot of stalwart characters have very generous main schemes, which means she can use that free forwarding to get them back under control after the villain does scheme, since she can stop them with a confuse. I do think for Phoenix, or while they are kind of different, you'll get a different experience playing them. I think some of the unique things about Phoenix, Psylocke just does them better now. So I think that's slightly unfortunate, but I don't know if that's Psylocke's fault so much as more of a maybe slight problem with Phoenix, unfortunately. But hey, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, what you think. Thank you so much for your continued support. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I'm having a video on aggression, I don't think this coming week actually, but I think the next week. And hopefully I'll see you guys there. Have a great day. Bye.